Everyone. Welcome back to the Live Athletic Podcast. This is your host, Kyle Arsenault, and we are about to be on episode 3 of the Live Athletic Podcast. And today, what we're going to talk about is all about intermittent fasting. Okay, so intermittent fasting, or IF, is probably something that you've heard being spoken about over the last few years, if not the past decade or so. Has really become pretty big in the health, fitness, and performance industry as a method of nutrition. And for good reason, honestly. And that's what we're going to kind of go through today are, what is intermittent fasting? What are the benefits? And then also what my experience is with intermittent fasting and how I'm using it. Okay, so let's dive right in. First off, intermittent fasting. For those of you that maybe haven't heard about it, what is intermittent fasting? Well, it's kind of right in the term, right? So intermittent, so meaning not all the time or sparingly, and then fasting, not eating. So you're not eating all the time. Okay, what we typically know it as periods of time without eating, and then periods of time where you're feeding or your feeding window. And there's different methods and different protocols that we'll talk about here in a little while on, hey, what are the different kind of ways we can use intermittent fasting. Okay, so that's kind of what intermittent fasting is. So you have a period of time where you don't eat, and then you have a period of time where you eat. Boom, pretty plain and simple there. Okay. Now, what does the science say about intermittent fasting? So what is all this hype about? And there are actually a lot of studies and a lot of data collected that do show some pretty good benefits with those who utilize intermittent fasting. Okay, one of the things that a really good benefit is it helps regulate blood sugar. So when we talk about blood sugar and insulin responses and all that, really what we're talking about is our ability to utilize sugar and our ability to regulate sugar, whether it's sugar we're eating or sugar the body is creating from other sources within the system. And really what that also does is if we are more sensitive to insulin and we utilize sugar well, we can reduce our risk of type 2 diabetes, for example. Okay, and that's type 2 diabetes then can lead to other hosts of other diseases. So, but again, so if we can help regulate our insulin sensitivity or our blood sugar, we can actually see a greater decrease in our chance for type 2 diabetes. Pretty important, pretty cool stuff. It can also help control lipids, such as cholesterol. We all know cholesterol levels and certain cholesterol levels, how they interact with the systems and heart disease and all that stuff. So again, intermittent fasting has been shown to actually have a positive effect on cholesterol levels and blood lipid levels. It's been linked to a decrease in heart disease, cancer, and other diseases. And really, one of the things that I came across recently, it was actually on Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's podcast. She was talking about and honestly, I forget who the guest was on her podcast, but what they were talking about was something called proteostasis. And really what that is actually kind of the cleansing and the reformulation of cells. And this takes place when we are in a protein deficient state, or we are, we haven't had protein in the system for a while. What they were talking about is when we have an abundance of protein all the time, it actually it creates protein synthesis, which again for us, especially in the physical training world, we're always thinking about protein synthesis, creating proteins and synthesizing protein in order to produce more muscle mass. The issue becomes, or what they were talking about, it becomes when you have too much protein or protein all the time, it's almost like the system is working too fast, and then it actually makes mistakes within our protein mechanisms, which again is never good because then that can lead to disease. So what proteostasis is the breakdown and the cleansing and kind of recapturing of proteins when we are in a protein deficient state, because it's kind of slowing that process of protein synthesis down a bit. So it makes it a little bit more efficient when they're trying to cleanse the cell. Really what that means is then, okay, now the cells are healthier and they live longer. And if our cells are healthier and live longer, then we in turn are healthier and live longer. And they actually saw this in studies with rodents, that the rodents that were following intermittent fasting protocols, those rodents actually lived longer than the rodents that were fed regular meals day in and day out. So again, we're talking rodents here, but there's a pretty good correlation between the science conducted with rats and rodents and the correlation to human beings. Okay, so that's what the science kind of says for us. Okay, and then there's also the big thing with intermittent fasting in our population and those who train. It's like, okay, well, how is this going to benefit me when it comes to fat loss? There have been shown to be some really good benefits when it comes to fat loss. Okay, and not only all of the mechanisms we just kind of talked about. So when our insulin sensitivity is better, our blood sugar is controlled, we actually see, again, a greater fat loss potential or a decrease in fat accumulation. Okay. But the big thing I think that we see is that when we restrict our window of feeding to a certain period of time, and again, we're about to talk about the different protocols within it, that actually decreases the amount of time, obviously, that we can consume calories. And therefore, typically, we actually consume less calories overall. When we are in a caloric deficit, again, consuming less calories, we'll see a greater propensity for fat loss. Makes sense, right? You're not taking as many calories, so you're going to, say you're burning the same amount of calories, you're taking in less calories, you're typically going to lose fat. Okay, so that's usually the biggest thing when it comes to fat loss. Other things that it's been kind of proven to shown in different studies is hunger regulation. So again, if it allows us to actually be desensitized to our hunger signals, then we're not as likely to, again, feed all the time and then take in too many calories, which, again, obviously, if we take in too many calories over time, leads to fat loss typically, or fat gain typically. Okay. The big thing with intermittent fasting and fat loss, though, is that we can't think of intermittent fasting as this magic method that will just help us get shredded and lean and all that stuff, especially if we use it improperly. And a couple things improperly means fasting for too long. Okay, so most of us, myself included, especially when I was younger, when something was good, more was better, right? So if we're saying, hey, intermittent fasting, so fasting intermittently, literally right in the term, is good, then fasting for a long time must be better. Again, we've seen some things say, yes, hey, fasting for a few days in a row, or maybe even potentially fasting for a week every once in a great while, will have some positive attributes to health and longevity. But when we do this over a long period of time, we'll see that, again, too much of something is usually not good. And that is the same thing with intermittent fasting. Okay, the other thing when it comes to fat loss and intermittent fasting is a lot of people think that it's kind of this, this giveaway, this pass that they can eat whatever they want and as much as they want, as long as it's within their feeding window. And we know that's wrong, right? So it doesn't matter if you have 8 hours to feed or 1 hour to feed. If you crush yourself full of nasty processed, high sugar, high processed fat food items, not only that are chemically just disgusting, but they also carry a very high caloric load, you're going to overconsume calories very quickly. So it doesn't matter if you're intermittent fasting or not. If you're utilizing, let's say, 2,000 calories a day, but you continuously take in 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 calories, you are going to accumulate fat. It's just, that's the way the system works. Okay, there's obviously some nuances between the calorie in, calorie out argument, but again, that is kind of a very good base argument. Okay, so again, those are a couple of things. So intermittent fasting has been shown, those benefits that we went over there, has been shown to be beneficial for fat loss, but too much of it or not utilizing it properly, meaning that you're still not taking care of your quality and quantity during your feeding window, that can result in negative consequences. Okay, so with all that being said, I kind of want to talk about what has my experience been with intermittent fasting. Okay, so probably about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago now, I was actually intermittent fasting, and I was using what we call a 16 and 8 protocol. So for 16 hours, you are fasting, and then for 8 hours is your feeding window. So for me, and for most people that I know that utilize this, it's usually from noon to 8 p.m., there's your feeding window. From 8 p.m. until noon the next day, there's your fasting window. So basically, you're basically skipping breakfast for most of us, okay? And then you're picking up your first meal at lunchtime or noontime. Okay, so that's what I utilize. I actually utilize that for, again, probably 6 weeks straight. And what I found was, benefits. So here's some benefits. Number one, honestly, digestion actually felt way better for me. I felt like it was just much cleaner, so to speak, as far as not as much gas from eating. Okay, and the regulation was just much easier, much better. Okay, so a digestive benefit is what I found, kind of first and foremost. Second, for me, in my schedule, I'm up at 4:30. I've said that before, I believe on the first 2 podcasts there, first 2 episodes. But if I get up at 4:30, I'm not going to make breakfast. I kind of talked about that last episode. That means I have to make breakfast the night before. I still have to make it. So even though I'm not making it at 4:30 in the morning, I'm still making it. So that's still taking time away from me, away from my family. So another benefit for me is the days that I was fasting, which again for those 6 weeks straight or so, I wasn't making breakfast. And it was nice because that means, hey, I didn't have to dedicate any time at night to doing that. Okay. Another benefit is I've always been one of those people up until pretty much this point that man, if I'm not eating regularly, I feel like I have a blood sugar drop. I get a little nauseous, a little lightheaded. My energy drops. And then all I can think about is food. Literally like that. That's just all consuming. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm coaching or writing emails or content delivery or anything, if I'm hungry, man, that's all I'm thinking about is food. And then again, it kind of plays in my mind. If I'm hungry, then, oh crap, I must be getting lightheaded and nauseous and having a blood sugar drop. Going into the intermittent fasting, I was like, oh man, this is gonna be tough. And then after honestly a day or two, I was like, wow, like, I don't find myself that hungry. I'm actually feeling pretty good. I'm pretty aware. I don't have any lightheadedness or nausea or anything going on. So I think a lot of that was a mental issue that I was having from previous experiences with a little bit of a blood sugar drop. But now it's almost like my body's been regulated around that, especially after a few days of the intermittent fasting protocol, again, the 16-8 protocol that I was doing. So what was nice about that is now mentally, I know I can go for periods of time without food and be okay. I'm not gonna lose all my muscle mass. I'm not gonna feel lightheaded. I'm not gonna be nauseous. My quality output as far as cognitive abilities and physical capacities will still be there for me. It's not like I'm just gonna jump off this cliff just because I haven't eaten for the last 4, 5, 8 hours. So that was another benefit for me. And then probably the last benefit, and this is just me, and I know a lot of people kind of share this, I'm a volume eater. Okay, so I enjoy, when I eat, I like to eat a lot of volume. Okay, I want to feel full. I honestly never liked the kind of 6 meal thing. I thought it was the right thing to do because back then, again, a lot of the science and a lot of the gurus out there were saying it, and not that it's a bad thing. I know it goes kind of against intermittent fasting in general to eat 6 to 8 small meals a day, but a lot of people have had success with that as well. But I never liked it because I never felt full. I was like, man, like I'm done eating, and all I can think about is that I want my next meal. I mean, luckily, my next meal was about 2 hours away or so I was able to eat again. But again, I never felt that feeling of satiety. When I fast and I'm eating between 12 and 8, and I only have an 8-hour feeding window, I'm basically taking my breakfast, all the calories that I'm going to get at breakfast, and I'm trying to put them in that 8-hour feeding window. So my meals are bigger. I have another snack in there. So I'm trying to get the same amount of calorie. Again, that's a personal thing. I'm trying not to lose weight. If anything, I'm trying to gain a little muscle mass here and there. But my meals were bigger, so again, it made me more satiated. It just felt better. It felt like, okay, cool, I was actually eating versus having these small snacks. Okay, so there's some benefits that I saw from the intermittent fasting. Some of the negatives, and really, I guess there's only really 2 negatives that I experienced with the intermittent fasting piece. Number one was actually more from the family side of things. So if I wasn't eating breakfast when my family was sitting down to eat breakfast, especially the young guys, they're like, "Daddy, why aren't you eating? You should be eating with us. Daddy, you got to eat. Daddy, you should be eating with us. Don't you want this? Don't you want?" So boom, there's a little kid for you. But even if it was just me and Jamie, and she's eating breakfast and she's eating by herself, it's not always that fun to be sitting there and somebody's not eating and you're eating, right? So that was kind of just an environmental thing that I found that, hey, if I'm a faster, if I'm an intermittent faster, but everybody else around me is not, either you might be uncomfortable, they might be uncomfortable, or you're just not sharing that time with them the way you typically do. Okay, and then the second, and I'll call it a negative in my situation, personally, I lost too much weight. And I know people are like, oh, geez, Kyle's talking about losing too much weight. I can't lose any weight. And I don't mean to stick that in anybody's face, but my goal is not to lose weight. Okay, and so that does become an issue for me, is when I'm trying to maintain muscle mass or put muscle mass on and I see the scale going the other way, that's a negative for me. Okay, so I just wasn't able to get the same amount of calories in that 8-hour feeding window that I was throughout, pretty much a 16-hour feeding window from previous to that. Okay, so, but again, that does show you that intermittent fasting does work for weight loss and fat loss typically. So there's a kind of a positive with a negative depending on what your situation is. Okay, so the other things so now with all that being said, what am I doing? So, hey, I found those positives with intermittent fasting, but I didn't want to lose the weight. So what am I doing? I'm using intermittent fasting. So I am intermittently fasting when my physical capacity and physical output is lower. On my conditioning days, on the 2 days a week that I do my conditioning, and on the 1 day a week that I don't do any planned training. Okay, I mean, I'm always physically active. We're always on our off day. We're typically going for hikes or swimming or something like that. But that's a low level threshold compared to what we typically do from a training and or conditioning standpoint. But on my conditioning days and on my off day, I am actually going through the 16-8 intermittent fasting protocol again. So noontime I start eating, 8 p.m. I'm finished eating, and that's why I cycle. So it's awesome because 2 days a week, my conditioning days, I don't have to make breakfast. I get to eat bigger meals during those days, even though it's a lower output day physically, conditioning output. I still get the benefits of the digestive benefits that I experienced. I still feel the awareness and the again, the mindfulness that I felt when I was intermittent fasting for those 6 weeks. And I'm getting that a couple days a week. And then the other days of the week when I'm having a higher output, so I'm training, I'm resistance training, I'm getting after it. Those are the days I'm going to eat, again, with a 16-hour window, so to speak. So I am eating breakfast, I'm eating a snack in the morning, all the stuff that I was typically doing before that. Okay, so that's how you can kind of get the benefits of both intermittent fasting and not intermittent fasting by actually using intermittent fasting according to your physical output, your performance output. So when your performance output is down, go ahead and fast. When your performance output has to go up, go ahead and eat a little bit more calorie intake, eat before you're training, all that stuff that we typically talk about. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. So that's my journey with intermittent fasting, and then a little bit of the background on intermittent fasting in the beginning of the episode. This is something that we try to help our members out with as well. So if there's any questions, go ahead and shoot me an email. It's kyle@theathleticway.com. If you have any input on intermittent fasting, if you have any more questions on intermittent fasting, go ahead and let me know, and we'll try to get those answered for you. But until next time, guys, thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, go ahead and share it with some friends and family that you think could use this and find this useful. And then just any questions, go ahead and shoot them my way. All right? So I'm all out. I'm done, and I'll talk to you later.